You are listening to the Maple Footy Podcast. This is the unofficial football podcast of the North. I'm your host, Sam Little. Find me at official Sam Little on Instagram. There's nothing left to say except for sit back, enjoy, and welcome to the show.
Hello, yes, welcome back to another episode of the Maple Footy Podcast, the unofficial football podcast of the North. And today we will be covering the Forge Atletico Ottawa CPL Playoffs semifinal that took place over the weekend. But first, I will apologize. My throat has been a little bit sore the last couple of days, so if it sounds a little bit maybe not normal, that I will attribute that to why. Or maybe it's just a bad episode. I'm just kidding. There are no bad episodes on the Maple Footy Podcast. But, all seriousness, let's actually start off with the CPL has, over the last week, trickling out announcements for its player awards. And I just wanted to give credit to the nominees. So, first up for Golden Glove is Thomas Vincenzini from York United, Callum Irving for Vancouver Football Club, and Emil Gazdov of Pacific FC, and that's for the Golden Glove. Who is my pick? I'd probably say Vincenzini. I thought he had a great year. Moving into the young player, so this is the best U21. Up first, making him a double nominee, Emil Gazdov of Pacific FC. Then moving in with York defender Noah Apna. I'm very sorry if I'm not pronouncing the name correctly. And then, of course, former Forge player Kwesi Poku, who is obviously still eligible for the award as he did play this season with Forge. Canada's newest Cappy, I guess you could say. I would say my vote would lie with Kwesi Poku. I mean, he had a great season and has since kicked on in Belgium and the Canadian men's national team. Obviously, that won't count for the award, what he's doing in Belgium. But still, I think it just shows that he's a very quality player. Moving into Defender of the Year, Alexander Ashenyotiansen of Forge FC, Dan Klump of Cavalry, and Themi Intonjalu, I'm very sorry once again if I'm saying that incorrectly, of Valor FC. My personal pick would be Ashton Yodi-Onsen, but obviously since Dan Klump has been nominated for another individual award, which is Players Player of the Year, I'm going to assume it'll probably be him, but I think Ironman Ashton Yodi-Onsen, I think, deserves definitely a win here. Players Player of the Year, which is obviously different than Player of the Year, because why not? I mean, all leagues have this, so I do appreciate when they do the Players Player of the Year. Just funny to me that there's a separate one for Players Player and then just Player of the Year. Anyways, off on that mini tangent. So Players Player of the Year nominees, there's 4 representatives of Forge: Benny Badibanga, Kyle Becker, Tristan Borges, and Alessandro Shapapor. Cavalry has a couple as well. 3. Dan Klump, Ali Musi, and Tobias Warchewski. Of Atletico Ottawa, Ruben Del Campo. York United has Brian Wright. And Pacific has themselves Lorenzo Caligari. My pick, and I have already said this on the podcast, I would say is Tristan Borges. And if not him, I do think it does have to go to one of the boys in the orange, as they had a phenomenal year as a team and individually. I think a lot of their players were very good. No disrespect, obviously, to anybody who I'm saying, shouldn't win this. But yeah, I would say any of the Forge players, my personal pick would be Tristan Borges. Coach of the Year is Benjamin Mora of York FC, Bobby Simeonis of Forge FC, and Tommy Wheeldon Jr. of Cavalry FC. Once again, I think it's got to be with the Forge man, Bobby Simeonis. I mean, he's been nominated all 6 years and has yet to win this honor. I mean, even if you don't think he deserves it, I think at this point it's got to be a legacy award, right, for him if he wins it, because how has he never won it? But, I digress. And then, of course, the player of the year, once again, different than player of the year. You got Kyle Becker, a former winner, Tristan Borges, a former winner, Alessandro Hajabapur, Tobias Warshevsky, and Brian Wright. Nice to see Brian Wright. I think he had a great year, as well as, all of these guys had great years. I will, of course, be sticking with Tristan Borges here, and once again, if not him, I think one of the Forge boys. That's just my opinion. I'd be curious to know who you think should win any of these awards, not just the player of the year, but just any of the awards who you think would have your vote. But with all this being said, let us get into our little CPL playoff semifinal breakdown and try saying that 5 times fast. But obviously, it was contested at Tim Hortons Field, the last game at Tim Hortons Field for the year, as the final will be hosted in Calgary, as Calgary did win the first semifinal against Forge, and then Forge won here. I know if you're kind of new to the format, it is a little bit confusing, maybe, but definitely a different one, and I think it's kind of a cool one, all things considered. So overall, I do think the game was it was pretty back and forth, and I think pretty well contested too. I think both teams had their spurts where they looked like they were in charge of it. I think Ottawa, I think, will feel hard done by here. I don't think Forge were perhaps an undeserving winner, but I do think Ottawa perhaps did a little bit more to kind of get to that final. But as I've said before on the podcast, the main stat at the end of the game that you look at is who won and who lost, and on the day it was Forge that found the way to dig in and get the win, whereas Ottawa, I think, will kind of be left to rue some missed chances, I would say. Starting out with their goalkeeper, Nathan Ingham, I really don't think he had a whole ton to do outside of the goal, and really even the goal itself, I don't think there was a whole ton he could have done. He did have a headed chance in the 92nd or 93rd minute of stoppage time. So hey, maybe if he headed the ball a bit harder, he could have been a goal scoring goalkeeper. But no, all seriousness, I really don't think he had a whole ton to do outside the goal. And like I said, there wasn't a whole ton I think he could have done about the goal. But moving into their defense, I think their defense had a pretty solid game. Keeping the Forge front three, who I will talk about a little bit more when I do talk about Forge. They kept the Forge front three pretty quiet for the most part, I would say. The really only time where they kind of slipped up and it cost them was on the corner. And just that quick succession of corners, they're kind of conceding corners that they maybe perhaps shouldn't have conceded so much at the start of that second half, and that succession of corners kind of leads to the corner that gets Forge the inevitable winner. I think, as the commentary kind of said, you kind of are tempting fate at that point of giving Forge, a team that is very good on set pieces, you're kind of giving them a chance to get that goal, if you know what I mean. Some of the corners, obviously they had no choice, but there were some where it was like, maybe you shouldn't have put that ball out. Maybe there was time to control that. Maybe there was time to clear that a different way. But obviously, in such a high pressure scenario, you're kind of just thinking, keep this ball out of my net. So that was probably me being a little bit harsh on them. But really, the one real time that I don't think we can really argue where the Ottawa defense shut down and was punished was the final corner that led to the Forge goal. I believe it was Jesus Amo who kind of just let Bellewu of Forge just get a free header. He didn't challenge him at all. He was right there. They were tussling a little bit, and Bellewu just kind of has an open header, wasn't challenged in the slightest. And I think as a defender in such a big match, I think you kind of have to at least put in a little bit more effort. And I do apologize if it wasn't him. It looked like it was him. But once again, if it was not, I do apologize. I'm not trying to slander you. But, whoever it was, if it was not him, I think it's just poor defending. Kind of now looking to some other defenders on Ottawa. I think Didic he was quite good, I thought. Won a lot a lot of 50-50s. He was really trying to distribute from the back, was trying to carry the ball forward. He even had a shot less than a minute into the first half that, it kind of was one of those ones that was always rising. But potentially if it wasn't, it really looked like Forge's Kalelat was really scrambling in his goal to get there. Obviously the shot was never troubling him, but he kind of looked a bit caught out, a bit unexpected. So I don't know why Ottawa didn't kind of keep doing that. Obviously not every single chance, give it to Didic, let him shoot from 35 yards out. But, maybe here and there, just because there was times where Ottawa just kind of looked like they kind of just ran out of steam towards the 18-yard box. Maybe at that point you kind of lay it off and let Didic pull a Rudiger and just kind of fire some in, because even if you keep it on target, Kalelat could, maybe push it out to an Ottawa player, and it's an easy rebound, right? But obviously it wasn't really utilized after that. But I do think Didic had a solid game and looked like he was maybe battling a little bit of a bit of an injury, perhaps. He did go down. It didn't look like it was phasing him too much, but who knows? Maybe man is just a fighter and he was not getting off that field, which respect if that is the case. One of his partners, Walker, I thought he was once again very good. I thought it was good against York, and I thought it was good here. He, once again, kind of like Didic, was kind of winning a lot of 50-50s, was very smart too. One of his plays where he kind of just totally pocketed Becker when Paul came in for Becker, and Walker just got himself in the right position, not even nodded, chested the ball out so calmly out for a corner kick. And that was one of the corner kicks where it was like, yeah, no, that's a fair one to concede, just in case you were wondering. But yeah, I thought it was a solid game. He does obviously come off towards the end of the game as Ottawa was just trying to throw stuff at the wall to try and hopefully get something. It didn't happen, but he was one of the sacrificial guys, I guess, that you could kind of say, as they did bring on Kevin Santos for him. One of the wingbacks, Morer, once again, very sorry if I'm mispronouncing any of these names. He had a decent game. I think he kind of struggled to get involved here. It wasn't it's not like I'm sitting here going, oh my gosh, terrible. But it just kind of looked like he struggled just a little bit to really find his footing in this game. But I think he was kind of helped with the fact that Forge's front three just weren't with it on the day. And yeah, I mean, I don't really have a whole ton more to say on him. Going to the left side, Matteo Brenier. Once again, nothing to really say on him. I think he kind of handled the front three well as well. Didn't really do a whole ton to stand out, but sometimes that's a good thing when you're a defender. You know what I mean? I don't mean it as a slight. I just don't really think he stood out, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. Just kind of leaves me with not a whole ton to say on the matter. But moving up into their midfield, I think their midfield was quite good, if I'm being honest. Aparicio, Sissoko, and Bassett all had their chances to actually probably find the back of the net. Aparicio, probably the best of the lot, where he was about 6 yards out, and Kalelat does make a great save, pushing the ball onto the, I believe it was crossbar, but it might have been post. But outside of that, I thought Sissoko a couple of times took the ball, danced through the Forge defense or midfield, which was saying something because I thought the Forge defense was pretty good. But Sissoko kind of just found those little pockets of space. I mean, perhaps it helps that he was playing against his former club. He knows how they play, I guess. But yeah, I thought he had a good game, characteristically so. Ollie Bassett, I thought he had a good game, perhaps a quiet game by his standards, but I think it was a good game nonetheless. I think he was kind of nullified to taking shots from like 20 yards out. He did a couple of times, and they never really tested Kalelat all too much. Bassett, I think his delivery on set pieces was pretty good, expectedly so. He is quite good at those. But maybe a quiet game by his standards, but I do still think it was a good game from him nonetheless. And I already touched on Aparicio, but once again, him, Bassett, and Sissoko, I think they all linked up really, really well. You could tell that there's some great chemistry there. And if they can keep hold of all three of these players going into next season, maybe Ottawa does find themselves in the final, because I do think the quality is definitely there. They all, like I said, linked up rather well with each other. And the only thing that I think they could have done was perhaps score, and I'm not saying that to be like a smart guy, but really I think that they played a really good game, and the only thing that I think Ottawa as a whole kind of fell short of was just getting that goal. But moving to their two strikers, Tabla and Del Campo, I do think these two will probably be the most disappointed of any Ottawa player coming off the field, as Tabla kind of had a very quiet game, which is a little bit disappointing given that against York, I thought he had a very good game. It was very dangerous, whereas here he kind of struggled to, I think, get involved in the play. I think Forge kind of saw him as a big threat, and I think they marked him as such. And just at certain points, it just didn't look like he was really threatening all too much to be getting a goal. But still, nonetheless, a quality player. And moving across to his strike partner, Del Campo, another guy who I think you would have expected a little bit more from. I really do. Game on his foot, and as the guy that finished second in the Golden Boot race, you would have expected him, I think, to bury it. It was in the last 10 minutes for sure. I can't remember the exact timestamp when he had that chance in and around the 12-ish yard area. He was inside the 18-yard box and pretty close to that 6. I think he's got to bury it. I really do. I think a player of his quality, a player of his standards, I think you have to bury that and put this game to extra time. He doesn't do that, and I think it'll be one of those chances I think Ottawa really, really ruse come maybe looking at the game tape, or who knows, maybe they don't, because season's over. I'm sure they're probably booked their holidays right now. But just my opinion, once again, from both Tabla and Del Campo, I don't think it was like, oh my gosh, disaster class. I don't really think it was that. They did cause Forge problems at times, but then at times just kind of never really looked like they could threaten. And in Del Campo's case, he should have buried that, I think. That's my opinion. But yeah, for Ottawa, I think going into next season, I mean, in this last 18-month period, I would say they've done a pretty good job at assembling a lot of guys who have either won or played in finals or what have you, to try and get this Ottawa team their first CPL championship. The closest they've come is in 2022 when they did lose the final. So I think now it's kind of just seeing them over the hump and keeping hold of some of these guys, because obviously you never know moves and whatnot, who's going to leave, who's going to stay. But I think if you keep hold of a good majority of these guys, they still have a chance. I mean, they were never down and out from this game. And really, I think in some, to a lot of people's opinions, probably could have been playing in the final against Cavalry had certain things, chances had gone their way on the day. But obviously, it's not meant to be, I suppose. But yeah, I mean, I think still a season to be proud of. I mean, they missed out on the playoffs last year, having been to the final the year before. So then to miss out completely, to now get to the semifinal stage, I think is pretty good. Obviously, the goal is always to win, to get to the final and win. But still, bringing in all these guys, I don't think is a bad idea. And a lot of these guys are still under like 30, so still in their prime years. It's not like it was like a missed boat opportunity, I don't think, of where it's like, if we don't get it done now, all of our guys are aging and whatnot. I really don't think it's that. I do think that they still have a very talented team, if, like I said, if they keep hold of most of these guys. But yeah, I think head held high going into the off season, keeping hold of some crucial players, and then just going again next season, staying motivated and getting back to the playoffs again. I think that'll be the goal. So yeah, Ottawa season done and dusted. There's still one more game to be played, and that will be between Forge and Cavalry. So let's talk about Forge, where I think kind of like Ottawa, had their spurts in the game where it looked like Forge was on top. As I did say, I think Ottawa probably had more of those. But I don't think Forge was terrible. Still not that high-flying Forge team that I think we saw throughout the season. That could be attributed to all the games they've played. Not trying to make excuses for them at all, but could be contributed to the games that they've played. That was their 42nd game of the season. So comparatively, Ottawa, I think, had played 34. So that's a good few less games, less travel, all that fun stuff. Obviously, if you want to be a successful team, you will find yourself playing more games, and that's high level elite any sport. That's high level sport in general, high level football. So obviously, I mean, what a complaint to have. We've played too many games because we're successful. But I do think potentially maybe that's caught up with them just a little bit. This last month, they have really looked a little bit slower, a little less dangerous. But today, or well, not today, this is being recorded after the game. So on the day, I do think that they show glimpses of being that mid to late early season Forge that we saw apart from the last month Forge. Still, I do think that they will have to play better against Cavalry if they want to bring home 5 of 6. But let's kind of take a look at their team, break it down a little bit. Yassim Kalelat, I think, made up for his error against Cavalry last weekend. Made some big saves this weekend, particularly against Aparicio. I thought that was probably the save of the match, but made definitely a good few saves throughout. And yeah, just I think a solid performance from the keeper. And I don't really have a whole ton to say on him. Kept his team in the game as you would want a goalkeeper to do. And just a big performance from him all around. Moving into the fullbacks, Malcolm Duncan, I had a lot of praise for him against Cavalry. This game, I thought he had a quieter game. No disrespect at all. I just think it was a quieter afternoon for him. I don't think he has hands as full, potentially. And yeah. Sorry, I sung his praises last weekend, and this weekend I just feel bad because I'm like, yeah, I mean, wasn't great, wasn't bad. Just kind of went out there, did his job. Not much was required of him. And I mean, as a defender, like I kind of said for some of the Ottawa guys, maybe that's for the best because as a defender, maybe a quiet afternoon's not the worst afternoon in the world. But kind of moving over to his left back, Bellewu, who in these playoffs has really stepped up in the absence of Para, who I think would have been starting in these games. And now going into the final, I don't think you could take Bellewu out. That's my opinion. I really don't. I think he had a great game against Cavalry, had a great game here today. Once again, I say today. A great game against Ottawa. And yeah, some obviously outside of the game-winning goal, he made some big clearances, big blocks, big challenges, big tackles. You know, I think he really helped Forge ensure that clean sheet. And it was just a really solid performance from him. And kind of just the cherry on top is that goal that sends Forge into the final. Once again, 5 of 6. Can't complain, you know. Moving into the center backs, I've obviously sang the praises of Antonio Janssen. I thought he was, once again, a rock at the back. Obviously had his hands full with Del Campo and Tabla, but I think dealt with it pretty well. I mean, clean sheet, so you would think he did. And yeah, just a typical performance from him. Solid, get the work done. You know, some big blocks, big clearances, comfortable on the ball, great distribution, and yeah, just top class from him. He's Forge's Iron Man this season for a reason. His partner on the day was Dominic Samuel, who was subbing in for Matusala, who went off injured against Cavalry. But yeah, Dominic Samuel, kind of Forge's utility man, kind of Mr. Reliable, as you will. Kind of just comes in when needed and puts in a solid performance. And he did here today, I think, once again, kind of like his partner. Had his hands full with Tabla and Del Campo, but I think kind of weathered the storm really well. And I mean, they don't call him Dynasty Dom for nothing. So just top class from Forge's defenders, I think, all around, and including their goalkeeper. Moving into the midfield, I thought their midfield was really strong today. I really did. Against Cavalry, I think they kind of looked a little bit maybe out of ideas, but not today. Sorry, I keep on saying today. Not that it really matters, but I'm not recording on the day of the game. I'm recording it a little bit after the game. So I apologize for keep on saying today. But yeah, again, against Cavalry, kind of looked maybe a little bit out of answers, out of solutions. But here against Atletico Ottawa, I think it was a great battle between the two midfields. Of course, Sissoko, Bassett, and Aparicio, and then you had Hajabapur, Jensen, and Becker. I do think it was a very fun battle to watch, especially kind of seeing guys like Hajabapur and Becker and Jensen, and then obviously the Ottawa boys playing just really well. Hajabapur makes 2 big clearances off the line in this one, so I guess that's a collection that he's got going, as he made one against Cavalry as well last weekend. One of the best players in the league this season, one of Forge's best players this season. Just really solid. I mean, just kind of the engine of that Forge team, really, when you think about it. Got great distribution, set Badibunga, Chouanier, Apoma, and Becker, Jensen, all off to the races a good few times with some great balls in behind. And that's kind of what you want to see from a deep-lying midfielder, and that's exactly what he did. And a lot of times in possession, he could even kind of drop in and be that third center back, and then let Bellewu and Duncan kind of push forward. So just something that you like to see, a top, really midfield performance. I believe he got the Gatorade performance of the match. I could be wrong, but I believe it was Hajabapur. And I think it was very well deserved. He was all over the pitch in a good way and really made it difficult for Ottawa at times to kind of get a stranglehold on the game. Looking at Noah Jensen, I think if Hajabapur is the general, Noah Jensen was kind of the engine, if that makes sense. He, kind of like Hajabapur, was all over the pitch. He links up well with Kyle Becker. Kind of like, you got Kyle Becker and then Kyle Becker Jr. between him and Jensen. But yeah, I think Jensen looked very up for this game. I think putting him into the starting 11 was potentially a very good call from Simeonis, especially if it is true, if Borges is kind of carrying a bit of a knock, because you'll kind of want Borges for the big game on Saturday. Not to say this one wasn't a big game, because this was obviously massive, but yeah, Noah Jensen I thought was top class, dispossessed, high up the pitch, was great on the press, and really, like I said, linked up well with Becker. Potentially had a couple of chances to even get a goal here. It doesn't happen for him on the day, but yeah, just honestly, yeah, a solid performance from him. Then looking at, obviously, the maestro, Kyle Becker, I think a response was needed from him after the game against Cavalry, and a response was definitely gotten. I thought he was great this game. Really, a lot of what Forge did on the attacking front, I think Becker had his fingerprints all over, created a good few chances, obviously grabs the assist for the Bellewu goal. And yeah, just this is the Becker that Forge fans have come to know and love and appreciate. I mean, he's the captain of the team for a reason, steps up for them in these big games, in these big moments. And for my money, is the best captain that the CPL has seen in its short history. But yeah, just I was really impressed with him, considering that he didn't put in the greatest of shifts against Cavalry. So to see him really respond to that, and really, I don't really think put a foot wrong, was kind of like Jensen and Hajabapur all over the pitch, really was wherever he needed to be, was a great outlet for the boys, and obviously was creating chances too. And that's always good to see from your maestro. And that's what Becker is for Forge. Looking at the front three, I'm kind of going to put them all together here with Chouanier, Poma, and Badibunga. In Badibunga's case, I don't blame him fully for not being as involved as I think he would have liked to be, and as much as I think Forge fans would have liked him to be, because he was playing in a bit of a different position than he usually does as that false nine, and I don't really think the experiment worked. Badibunga works best when he's on that left flank, getting to cut in, getting to be that tricky winger that kind of get you off your seat, whereas here he was kind of just nullified and centralized to the middle, didn't really get his fingerprints on the game, and I don't really think that's his fault. I think it's the position he was playing, and going into the final, I don't think I'd be putting him back at the false nine. He's most effective off that left flank. The only problem is Forge don't really have an informed striker at the moment. Jordan Hamilton hasn't found form, and Tyrion Campbell, I believe, I could be wrong, is coming back from an injury, not really in the best form either. So it's kind of one of those ones for Simeonis where it's like, what do we do here, So can't really blame him for playing Badibanga here, but maybe I think he probably should have switched him at some point, given that he wasn't as effective as you would have wanted a player of Badibanga's quality to be. And then the two wingers, Mpoma and Chouanier, I think are really, really wasteful here. They made some great runs, made the right runs, but then when it came time to make a decision, I think their decision-making kind of let them down. Taking shots when maybe they shouldn't have taken shots, crossing balls in when maybe they should have held and ran it for a little bit longer. So you would expect more from players of their quality. And that's not me saying, oh my gosh, these guys, God. It's just one of those things where it's like last game, they kind of were doing the same thing. I know Mpoma was the false nine last game, but regardless, Chouanier and Mpoma just not really making the best decisions. And I think coming into the final, you're going to need them to make those good decisions. You know what I mean? So we'll see what happens. Both players are obviously quality players. Chouanier is a Forge original. I don't believe Mpoma is. I apologize if you are. But obviously they've got quality. Just some decision making, I would say, kind of let them down. And I think they're going to have to really sharpen that up coming into the final, because you want your best players to be performing at their best, and if they're not, especially in a big game, it could cost you. So hoping that they both kind of get into the flow of it come the final. And then Forge obviously didn't really make any subs until the 90-minute mark, so I don't really have much to say on the subs. I do hope that they do have Borges back fully fit for the game against Cavalry, because you do need a player like Tristan Borges, because to me, once again, MVP level season. But if it is true and he is carrying a knock, I believe it, because come the end of the season, he was out of the match day squad completely on a couple of occasions, and then played against Cavalry, didn't look his sharpest, didn't look his best. So I would believe if he was perhaps carrying a knock, but come the final, I think they're going to need him. Even an 80% healthy for Borges, I think, needs to start here for Forge. But talk about the final, let's preview the final just a little bit. Rematch. For the third time in the CPL final history, it is Cavalry versus Forge. Of course, that first one in 2019, Cavalry Forge, and then, of course, 2023 and now 2024. This is going to be hosted at Cavalry, so I think the advantage for Cavalry is they got that home field advantage, and I think they're going to be riding on a huge wave of confidence. I think beating Forge in the manner of which that they did, I think, is going to be a massive confidence boost for that game. It wasn't the greatest game, as I kind of said last week, but still, Cavalry just seemed like they had Forge's number, and Forge couldn't really do a whole ton. And then now you're going to be playing them next week. I think it's a very big advantage for them. I really do, and especially at home, the supporters are going to be hungry. Cavalry has really tempted fate by getting to two finals previous and not winning. So at what point do you go, it's got to be your time? And I think that this has to be, for Cavalry's sake, I think it has to be the moment where they really finally do seize that opportunity, because last season, heavy favorites, I would say, going into that final. Of course, I think Forge were technically the betting favorites, but I think Cavalry were the favorites going into that final, having been the runaway league winners last year. And then not getting the job done. So I think now they're going to be extremely hungry. I think you got to learn when to kind of pick your moments, take your chances. And I think Cavalry did that last week against Forge. And I think that they could be doing it again this time to secure that first ever CPL North Star Cup. And then, of course, you have Forge, the dynasty of the CPL. I think their recent form would kind of make you think that Forge doesn't have it, but last year was Forge's one of their weaker seasons in the CPL, and still they come out on top as the winners because that is what they've been trained and conditioned to do. They know how to win. They know how to get the job done, and I think that's Forge's biggest weapon. They've been here before. They've been there. They've done that. They know how to win these games, and I think if you're Cavalry, that's kind of the big disadvantage for you. Forge has beaten you now twice in the CPL final. Forge knows how to get done. 4 of their 5 final appearances have ended in Forge winning. This is their 6th straight final appearance. Every single CPL final that's been played has featured Forge in it. I think that's a massive advantage for Forge. So I think it'll be extremely interesting to see. Especially, even though they are out of form, I don't think that you can sit here and count them out because I do think it could be a massive, massive test for Cavalry coming into this one because, like I said, Forge just wins. They are the dynasty. They win. But then, of course, you got Cavalry. Will it be third time lucky? I think it's a very interesting setup because these two teams have obviously some history between themselves. So I think Cavalry will really want to get that one up on Forge finally, whereas Forge will kind of want to continue that streak of dominance over Cavalry, and to do it in Cavalry's backyard I think would be pretty massive. So we will see how that plays out. I will be covering the CPL final, and I will be watching it. I do wish it was in Hamilton. I would have loved to have gone again. I went last year, and it was one of my favorite games that I've ever seen live because it was just the drama. You know what I mean? The drama was amazing. But obviously, Forge don't beat Cavalry last weekend, so Cavalry do get to host, and I do hope that those fans enjoy it. And any Forge fan that is traveling out to Calgary, I applaud you. That is a commitment, especially on such short notice, to fly out to Calgary. It's great to see, you know, because there will be Forge fans there, and there will be some extremely passionate Cavalry faithful there as well, of course. So we'll see what happens. Hopefully it's a great game. If it's anything like the final last year, we're in for an absolute treat. We'll see what happens. I have backed Forge as the winners since the first little episode I did of the CPL playoffs. So I will back Forge here. I will say that Forge can get it done. But in my whole honest opinion, I honestly think it's flip a coin. I can't call this one. I'll back Forge blindly. And you know if they win, I will sit here and go, I called it. But genuinely, I do think it's a flip of the coin kind of thing. I think it will really come down to who's better on the day, who's got whose number. You know what I mean? But with all that being said, please continue to watch Canadian football. Please continue to watch and support Canadian football teams. And please tune into the CPL final. You won't regret it. It will be great. And with all that being said, I can't wait for that final. I think it'll be a great game. Find me on my socials, wherever you want. Connect with me if you want. And we'll see how it goes. I'll cover the final, and I can't wait for it. Outside of that, Prem recap will be going up as well very soon, so look out for that. And outside of that, I think that's my spiel done. So, yeah, thank you for listening. I do appreciate it. Follow along and all that fun stuff. And yeah, until next time, everyone. Cheers.
And that was your Maple Footy Podcast. Thank you so much for listening. Check my socials for any and all future updates at Official Sam Little on Instagram, where I am most active. And until next time, live, laugh, little.